Are you ready for some deep spring cleaning as well as getting back on track? Because this week offers all of that, and it may be a little bit more than what you bargained for. The reason being is we have the full moon in Scorpio this week, which this is our first lunation in Scorpio since really October of 2021 that isn't an eclipse. And I'm really looking forward to this full moon because, again, we get to have this Taurus-Scorpio axis lit up for us without the intensity of an eclipse, which, again, it's been, 3.5 years since we've got to experience. As well, we're having Mercury stationed direct on top of the North Node. I want you to think back to where you were at, what you were doing around March 15th. That's when Mercury conjoined the North Node and entered shadow. And essentially, we get to come back to that time in our lives and what was going on and where our minds were, how fast were we wanting to go, how energetic we were. We get to return to all of that and get back on track as Mercury stations direct. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White, if you don't know me already. This week, we're talking about April 22nd through April 28th of 2024. This is that last final part of April where, in my opinion, this is where everything's starting to get pretty good. We do have this full moon that will be a little bit harsh, but I'm really giving this last 2 weeks of April and really the whole month of May as kind of the best astrology for the year. As well, last week we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and I'm really curious, and I want you to comment below of what happened during that time, if anything extravagant happened to you. Now, the date of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was last Saturday. However, I do kind of give the rest of April and kind of all of May for that to really manifest itself, because sure, the conjunction happened exactly on Saturday, but as we continue on with the month of May, the sun will be there, Venus will be there, and Jupiter will still be near Uranus. So I just think this whole end of April and the rest of May is really like still holding that Jupiter-Uranus energy. But we start Monday off on the 22nd with the moon in Libra making a conjunction to the South Node. It will then go opposite Mercury while it's still retrograde and Venus throughout the day. Now, while the moon's in Libra, again, when the moon's in Libra, we're a lot more emotionally connected to the relationships around us, wanting to have more peace, wanting to have more balance. But it's conjoining the South Node. There's something about it that we don't really get. We don't really have that satisfaction. Or, for example, the moon on top of the South Node in the sign of relationships could be the people that we may have around us or the people that are around us, whether that's by choice or not by choice, can just be a little bit exhausting. Of course, look at, what house the South Node is in right now for you. And as the moon conjoins the South Node on its way to the full moon in Scorpio, is kind of just realizing like this option is exhausting. This isn't exactly what I want to put my time and energy into. And sure, I need to have balance here. And sure, I need to kind of make things look nice, but this isn't really where my energy is at, and it's just exhausting and draining. And so I think there's a lot about Monday that, you just have an experience where you realize, okay, this is not exactly where I want to be. I am a little drained and exhausted. But as the moon separates from the South Node and then starts to make its opposition to Mercury retrograde and then Venus, both in Aries, there's kind of this dichotomy of like, okay, well, if this is draining and exhausting, well, you know exactly what you have to do. Mercury being retrograde in Aries, we're changing our plans. We're changing exactly how we're going to initiate these plans. Aries is all about action, drive, ambition. With Mercury retrograde there, again, we're just kind of rethinking what our next steps are or where exactly we want to start. And I just think as the moon's in Libra opposite Mercury and Venus, there's this feeling of like, okay, I'm really drained and exhausted from this one option. How do I really put all my chips into one basket? And what do I really need to do in order to move forward in the direction I want to? That's the North Node in Aries. The North Node is this hunger and this drive, and it's in the sign of Aries where it's about ambition and conflicts, coming back to just like the whole Iran-Israel thing. I said this plenty of times with the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra is that like that peace was never an option. I think as we kind of see more and more war kick off with the nodes here, when we take that into more of our personal lives, I don't want you to start conflicts, of course, but they will happen. But I just think another thing is that there's this hunger for, again, starting something, for going in a certain direction, for taking action. That might involve conflict. And with Mercury retrograde, there might be this internal conflict. There might be this mental conflict of like, what's the right path? What's the right thing to do? And Venus is in Aries where it's like, you know what? Let me, act first and, ask questions later. Let me do something first and think about it later. I just think as that moon is opposite there, we kind of get that really thrown in our faces where it's like, okay, this sucks. This is draining. I got to take action here. And then we get to Tuesday, and early Tuesday morning is when the moon ingresses into Scorpio. It's sign of fall. The moon doesn't do well in Scorpio, but we do have the full moon in Scorpio happening on Tuesday, and it is technically squaring Pluto. The moon will ingress into Scorpio, square Pluto, and then we have the full moon. The moon is about feeling good and emotions and, it's not necessarily pleasure, but like nourishment. And my favorite anecdote of the moon in Scorpio was back when the South Node was in Scorpio last May, essentially in 2023. I went and bought groceries during that time, and I bought unripe bananas and I bought meat. The bananas literally never ripened. Like they literally never got to the point where they were edible. They just stayed green for like a month, which was very weird. And it was like the meat just spoiled immediately. Like I didn't even get a chance to like, cook any of it. And I love that analogy for I just learned, I was like, okay, don't go grocery shopping with the moon and Scorpio on the South Node. The bananas will never ripen and the meat will, become rotten. And so I look at that with the moon and Scorpio. It's like, again, the moon can rule things like food. It can rule things like nourishment. And it's in its sign of fall. Like there's, bacteria and there's grossness. But this is a full moon that we have. And the way I look at this is the Taurus Scorpio axis. This is spring cleaning. What is all the dead stuff that we have in, our houses or the skeletons in our closet or even your garden bed? Like you have to rake out some of that dead, overgrown, plant matter and clean it up in order for the new things to kind of come about. You kind of have to prune your plants sometimes. And that's what this full moon is about. Now, what I look at, like, I think that's a great way to handle this full moon in Scorpio is literally like address what you don't want to address, the skeletons in your closet, what you need to clean up and clear out, and clean it up and clear it out. I think there's a little bit of like, I don't want to use the phrase PTSD, but that's all I can think of at the moment of like, oh my gosh, lunation in Scorpio and Taurus, it's been like 3.5 years and it's like been what is it, 2.5 years, 2.5, 3.5, something like that. And each lunation's been an eclipse. So it's like we might have this feeling of like things are going to be a lot more intense, but they're not going to be. It's like, it won't be as tense as the last few times. It will feel like, okay, like, yeah, I'm a little bit more emotionally drained, exhausted. But in order to like charge me up, like, what if I cleaned things out? What if I cleared things out? Like the Scorpio Taurus axis it's so beautiful in my opinion, because Taurus is about, here in Denver, everything's blooming. Like the tulips are popping up, all the leaves are turning green. And this is a good time to, again, like get rid of all of the old stuff that's dead over winter in order to expand the new stuff. But like, if we take that as an analogy, we may have to address the things that have been sitting there dead for a while and that we don't want to do. And yes, this full moon is squaring Pluto. I don't care about that much, in my opinion. If Pluto is about power dynamics and transformation, in my client work, Pluto has been really interesting in Aries Pluto has been really interesting in Aquarius, because I feel like it's like a 70-30 split where 70%, it's been pretty good for people. And I feel like 30% it's been a little bit, hard to deal with. And I found that really interesting, just given, you read Pluto off textbook, it's not supposed to be good. But it just reminds me that Pluto is about transformation, and like the way that you interact in a certain area of your life can transform. So I look at this full moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto as kind of like, hey, here's an opportunity to transform. And what I mean by transform, it's like, all right, these are all fixed signs. They don't want to move. They don't want to change. But this lunation might bring up like, hey, this is a part of your life that you need to change, that you need to take action on. And again, it's Scorpio. It's not going to feel all that good to address things that have been left dormant that you've been kind of ignoring. Or at least there's going to be emotions that are brought up that are not fun to deal with. But once you deal with them, once you purge them, it's like sometimes you just kind of have to cry. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever just kind of like let yourself loose? Like you got angry, you got upset, you cried. Then you take that great after, crying your eyes out nap. And then you're just kind of like, oh, I'm not over it, but I'm not as emotionally charged by it. Like sometimes you just have to let it out. That's how I look at Tuesday. We get to Wednesday, and really the only thing going on is the moon in Scorpio making a trine to Saturn. And this just reminds me of, again, that after like you cry nap where it's like the best sleep you ever get. And then you wake up and there's still some emotions attached to that experience, but you're not as charged by it. You're not as like upset by it. You're like, okay, like that sucked. But now I have a little bit more of a clear head because I let those emotions out. I let that nasty gunk like purge out of my body. And that moon trining Saturn is just kind of like, yes, this is the steps that you need to take. Been talking a lot about Saturn and Pisces being like, okay, like if Saturn is about maturity and discipline, yes, it rules burdens, but it's also, again, like growing up in a lot of ways. It's in Pisces, like the internal part of our beliefs. If Sagittarius is, oh, we have all these plans and this great vision and this is what I believe, Pisces is a lot about like, okay, who do you have to be on the inside to actually deal with that? And then when you deal with that, it's like, oh my God, like I can't be successful or I can't have X, Y, and Z because my childhood, and this is where I have all these internal blocks. And that's what a lot of Saturn and Pisces is like confronting or dealing with. And I like this moon in Scorpio trining Saturn where it's like, okay, like we have seen this negative and raw emotion. Now with Saturn and Pisces, what can we do to address it in the best way possible rather than just kind of going with it and just moving on? It's like, okay, are we going to let those negative emotions manifest into worse things? Are we going to hold on to those things, or are we going to let them go? We get into Thursday, and Thursday is kind of interesting. We will have the moon in Scorpio making an opposition to first Uranus and then Jupiter, which that's different because for the longest time, we've had moon going opposite Jupiter, then Uranus. So the moon will go opposite Uranus and then Jupiter. It will then trine Mars. It will trine Neptune. Then it will enter Sagittarius. And all at the same time, Mercury stations direct on the North Node. I think this is game day. I shouldn't say game day, but this is when we get back on track. And that's why I opened up with this video. Mercury being retrograde after the conjunction with the sun, after the cazimi, it's just kind of like, all right, we get it. Mercury's retrograde. Like, let's get the show on the road. And that's what Thursday is about. I think as Mercury stations direct in Aries on the North Node is, again, it's like, here's what I want to start. Here's what I want to initiate. Here's things moving forward again after a period of delays, after a period of rethinking and reviewing and trying new things. Now we have a clear headed of how to move forward in this area. It is on the North Node. There is kind of an extreme tenacity to it, where it's like, we got to go, 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 go. And that could be good. I think ambition is good. I think, acting quickly and taking action on things as soon as possible is good. I just think it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it. Like if you're not going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and if you're only going 900,000 miles an hour, it's like it's not fast enough. And that's where I would want you to be a little bit more like patient. Like you can only go as fast as you can go. But as the moon, while it's in Scorpio, it goes opposite Uranus and then it goes opposite Jupiter, which is funny to me because the moon in Scorpio opposite Uranus and Taurus is like, oh no, I got to try something new. Oh no, something I wasn't expecting. Oh no, instability where I want stability. And that might cause insecurity. That might cause emotional resentment. That might cause when one little tiny thing just like ruins your day because you let it ruin your day because you're already kind of mad about everything else going on. And then it's like someone cuts you off and it's just like from then on out, you have a bad day. That's what this reminds me of. But then the moon goes opposite Jupiter. And this is that test of like, are you really going to let that get to you? Are you really going to let things that are outside of your control ruin your emotions and your mood? And I look at the moon in Scorpio opposite Jupiter and Taurus is like, hey, like you can be like, okay, that upset me, but let me see the bigger picture here. How can I be a little bit more grateful for things that I have, for the situation that I'm in? For me, what's been working for me lately is here in Denver, the weather's been amazing. And I'm just like, something I've been really working on, and this has been an interesting hack, is when I start my day, I have an app. I have a tarot app that I've been using for, 10 years at this point. It's called Tarot and Numerology. It's like Tarot ampersand Numerology, one word. It's like a really basic app. I've talked about it in my videos before, in my astrology app videos. And I'll pull a tarot card. And what I hate about tarot cards is I'll get an image and then I'll get like the tower or death. And then I think worst case scenario. And what I do is before I even do that, or even after I do that, I just wake up, I have my coffee, I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm like, no, I'm going to have a good day today. Like the second I feel good for just a moment, as soon as I can, I'm like, sweet, that means I'm going to have a good day today. I'm not going to let everything else affect me. And that's been working, which is really weird for me. Like it's just weird that that's been working really well. And so I look at this moon opposite Jupiter as like, okay, you can be going through an emotional, turmoil or emotional insecurity, but I want you to like literally just be like, lock in and say, no, I'm going to make this good. I can see the best in the world. For me, why I was bringing up the weather is like, it's hard for me to have a bad day when it's been like 75 degrees. It's a little cold and rainy today, but it's been like 75 degrees and sunny. It's been amazing. And I'm like, how can I have a bad day when the sun is shining? And then the moon will make a trine to Mars and Neptune. And this is a little weird. Mars, in Pisces is a little bit like shapeshifty. It's a little bit of like, okay, Mars is our action, our drive, and fights and conflicts, and it's in the sign of Jupiter. It's Pisces. It's very like internal beliefs are kind of being shooken up, and we're unable to navigate our path with the moon conjoining Neptune. With Mars conjoining Neptune, which I have an interesting anecdote to talk about with that as we go along. I think as the moon in Scorpio trines Mars, though, it's kind of like, okay, I don't need to know what my 10th, 15th and 20th step is. I can just do what I know I got to do right here, right now. And then after that, the moon goes into Sagittarius on late Thursday evening, which I just think is exciting. Like, all right, we're feeling good. We're feeling free. Yeah, of course, when we get the moon in Sagittarius, it's going to end up scoring Saturn. But I think for a lot of Thursday, it's like, sweet, moon's in Sag. Let me just feel a lot more free. Let me just feel a lot more open and excited. That brings us to Friday. And we actually don't have much on Friday. The moon will be in Sagittarius and it will be applying to a trine with Mercury and a square with Saturn, but those won't actually hit until really early Saturday morning. So a lot of Friday is, I think, just feeling that moon in Sag, trining Mercury and Aries energy of like, sweet, what am I excited to do? What are my plans? What are my vision? I went through that weird couple days of, again, when you clean out your closet, when you get rid of those old clothes, when you do the spring cleaning, everything just feels good. Everything just feels refreshing. And I think that's what a lot of like Friday is. And I want you to enjoy it because when we get to Saturday morning, the moon first makes that trine to Mercury, right? We make that connection, but then it makes a square to Saturn literally within the same hour. And that moon squaring Saturn is, again, we might have all these dreams. We might have all these visions. The moon in Sag is like, I want to go hiking. I want to go exploring. I want to go, at some point here, I need to go to the Frisbee golf park to go and play Frisbee golf because that's what I want to do. And the moon in Sag making a square to Saturn is there being some sort of like, okay, I can't just be excited about X, Y, and Z. I have to do the internal work to get there. And again, what's fun about astrology is I like talking about the personal development side of it. I think I get the most use out of that, and that's what I want to share. That's what my channel is about. But a lot of astrology is like circumstantial, like things that you didn't predict. Again, like moon and Sag squaring Saturn and Pisces. Like I know if I go to the Frisbee park on like a Saturday in Denver at Cherry Creek, there's going to be a bajillion people there, and there's going to be teams of like 10 people going to each hole, and that takes forever. And I'm just one guy. I just go through the course in like 30 minutes. So I look at that moon and Sag squaring Saturn. It's like, well, there is going to be a slowdown. There is going to be a halt. There's going to be some block. There's going to be something in your way that's not allowing you to go as fast as you maybe want to. But then the moon separates from Saturn like really early Saturday, and the moon is just kind of hanging out in Sagittarius. It will be applying to Venus throughout the day. So again, I think really early Saturday, there's some restrictions, some like heavy energy, but then it kind of lightens up as we go throughout Saturday. Then on Sunday, we have the moon while it's in Sagittarius making a trine to Venus. This is just fun. Venus and Aries, it's like, again, I like saying like the bad bitch kind of energy. Like Venus and Aries is very, if I'm not mistaken, like Angelina Jolie. And I always think of her when I think of Angelina Jolie is in Mrs. Smith. Like she's kind of like, I'm cool, fucking spy, killer, like CIA asset kind of thing. But I'm sexy and we're all women that do it. Like, and we're not supposed to because we're better than the men. Like that's very Venus and Aries. And I think that's very fun. And so I look at the moon and Sag, like trining Venus and Aries is like kind of having fun with it. Like Venus is about like pleasure and connection and enjoyment, but she's in like an Aries where it's like, yeah, do something a little bit orthodox, do something a little bit more like that you typically wouldn't do. I like that. The moon, though, will then make a square to Neptune in Pisces, which gets a little bit lost in the sauce. The moon will then enter Capricorn. It will make a trine to Sun. And then we get the last highlight of the week, which is Mars conjoining Neptune. So I think the moon squaring Neptune is, I've been using the term lost in the sauce a lot, and maybe I need to be more clear about like what that means. But essentially, it's when you're like in over your head, you're too involved in something to see the bigger picture here. It is, you have no idea how hard it is for me to not use like a drug or a partying analogy at the moment. But the moon in Sag squaring Neptune is, I feel like you're about to go to a big concert or a big show and you have all these expectations and it squares Neptune and those expectations weren't really there, or like you didn't really get exactly what you expected. The vision didn't line up there. You were, bamboozled almost in a way. But by Sunday evening, the moon moves into Capricorn. I actually think that's like around Sunday afternoon. The moon moves into Capricorn. Emotionally, again, like I just like the moon in Capricorn transit. Most people probably don't because the moon wants to feel good, and Capricorn, it's like, oh, I have an emotional thing going on, but I'm at work. I can't cry. I can't express things. But the way to work with the moon in Capricorn is like, okay, you don't get the opportunity to be like emotional about something right here, right now. Focus on something that detaches you from those emotions. Again, getting your hands busy, doing something. I think Sunday evening is a good day to kind of prep for what the week looks like ahead. And the moon, while it's in Capricorn, makes a trine to the sun. I don't really talk about luminaries making aspects to one another, except for, of course, a full moon and a new moon. But the moon making a trine to sun is sun's in Taurus, moon's in Capricorn. It's like, sweet. Let's go over like what the plan is. Let's, really soak in what resources are available to us. It's springtime. What are your summer plans? What are we doing this next week? It's like just the energy is more alive and going. And I just like look at this as good planning energy. But then we have the last aspect. We have the last highlight of the week, which is Mars conjoining Neptune. And The other night, I was on my Patreon doing the May monthly overview that we do as a live stream, and something came up to me with the Mars Neptune conjunction. So I've told people I've gotten into the hobby of shooting and guns. It's all a lot of fun, and if you're into that, you're probably going to be familiar with the name of Grand Thumb. Grand Thumb is one of the biggest gun YouTubers on YouTube. Why am I bringing him up? One day I was watching his videos, and it was like, he's got to have something like in Scorpio. Like, what's going on with this guy? So I looked up his chart. I didn't have a time, of course, but he's an Aries sun. So if we made him an Aries rising, we look at his Mars because he's ruled by Mars. He has Mars in Capricorn conjoining Neptune in Capricorn. Why is that important? If you go to Grand Thumb's YouTube channel, it is some of the most cinematic. I mean, it is like they're shooting on red cameras for a lot of their newer videos. They're doing like these really good intro skits that just seem really real, and they're just very cinematic. And the music is so cinematic in his videos. Like, they're so like intense. It's like just really good cinematography and filming for especially just a YouTuber. But another thing he's well known for is like combat evasion and like camouflage. And he's also really known for like reconnaissance, which is like essentially hiding in the bushes and looking and peering at things. And why do I bring that up? Mars Neptune, like, you literally have like somewhat like Mars is like weapons and war conjoining Neptune of like media and mystery. And he has this whole video of like camouflage and how to hide yourself. And I just love that for like Mars Neptune exalted in Capricorn. Why do I bring that up with here? Because we have Mars conjoining Neptune, but in Pisces. I like this for camouflage or for, again, things being distorted, you being like blending into the background. What I don't like it for is there being a confusion, a uncertainty of what your next step is. And the reason I even bring him up too is I just think he's a great example of Mars conjoining Neptune. But I also look at it as like, when you talk about camouflage or when you talk about like reconnaissance in the way that he talks about, it's like you need to get information without being seen and without having conflict. So it's like Mars conjoining Neptune can look like, how do I go about this in the most, like, I don't want to say passive, but just as a fly in the room. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be noticed. I just want to gather information. I want to take the actions I need to take without being seen, without being noticed. What I like about Mars conjoining Neptune as well is that it's very creative. When you think about camouflage and you think about like some of the things that he talks about, some of the things that he talks about in his videos is like, there's a lot of creative ways to blend in with the background that you wouldn't even expect or that you wouldn't even like think about if you weren't actually, sitting down and like putting a lot of thought into it. And so Mars conjoining Neptune is, I think, being creative with where our actions are. There is a part of it that is feeling like I don't know which step to take. I don't know which road to go down. I don't know what my next action is. But what I also think it's good for is this is like Neptune. Yes, Neptune can deal with some spirituality stuff. Neptune can deal with very rose-colored glasses, idealism stuff. And Mars conjoining Neptune is, don't be afraid to lean into that a little bit. Yeah, it's Mars. Mars can have fights and conflicts. And, it's with the, planet of like, propaganda and media and, distortion of things. So there can be like this fight or this conflict around something that you don't really understand, or like, you ever like have a argument with someone where you guys are both like arguing about two separate things, but it's hard to actually get to the point of it. That's what Mars conjoining Neptune feels like. I don't want you to like, if you are feeling combative or angry, I think you should take a step back. Like, hey, everything's a little bit confusing right now. There is a lot of uncertainty. Where I think it is good for is saying like, okay, when it comes to what I want to do, when it comes to the action steps that I'm taking, how creative can I be? How out of my head can I get myself? Can I think outside the box? And that's what I think it's good for. We get to next week. Venus ingresses into Taurus, Mars ingresses into Aries, and the only other thing we have is Venus squaring Pluto. Why next week is so cool is this kicks us off for what I think is like, again, the best month of the year, which is May. We have Venus and Jupiter in the same sign, in a Venus ruled sign. We have Mars in Aries. It's in its domicile. It's going to conjoin the North Node. I like it more than I hate it. I just think the energy really kicks off starting next week for the rest of the month of May. So make sure you like this video if you got a lot out of it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below. Let me know what you're excited for this week and what your thoughts are. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next time.